All right, this is Billy Boy on the What's Up show. What's up? What's up? Okay, on today's show, we're going to talk about an incident that happened someplace in Minnesota. We won't specifically say any names or anything, but I do want to teach you a real important skill that you should know. And that's, when does your car become a deadly weapon? So that's what we're going to learn about today. When you're out driving your car around on a public road, when does law enforcement consider it to be deadly weapon? Because they consider it a deadly weapon, they can use deadly force against you. And a lot of you don't know that. So we have a lot of instances where police officers will stop your vehicle on the road. But before we do that, I just want to introduce Kevin Samuels, my AI. Kevin, can you say hello?
Well, hello there, and what's up? What's up? I'm your resident AI voice, stepping in as Kevin Samuels, here to add a little insight to this important topic. And you're absolutely right, Billy Boy. It's crucial for folks to understand that the moment a car is perceived as a threat, it can be treated as a deadly weapon, and that changes the whole equation in the eyes of law enforcement. So let's dive into that and make sure everyone out there knows exactly how to stay safe and informed on the road.
And it's not what you're thinking, and it's not what witnesses or people looking at you are thinking. It's what's going on between those two ears of that police officer holding that gun. That's what counts. What's going on in that police officer's eyes and in that police officer's mind. So you got to be very careful when you're out there. What do you got to say, Kevin?
Absolutely, and that's a spot on point. It's really all about the perception of that individual officer in the heat of the moment. It's not necessarily what the driver thinks is happening or even what bystanders might see from the outside. It's that officer's split second interpretation that can turn a routine stop into something much riskier. So the big takeaway is staying calm, predictable, and understanding that the officer's mindset is the key factor. It's like understanding the laws of physics in a science experiment. You have to know what variables are in play. So let's keep this conversation going and make sure everyone out there stays safe and informed.
And it's like you could be holding a water gun, or you could be holding a sprinkler gun. If you point it at an officer, that officer don't know that that sprinkler gun or that's a water gun. All they see is you're flashing something towards them as a threat. Even if you take and point your finger like this might be considered a threat, and you might get yourself blown away over it. What do you say, Kevin?
Absolutely, you've hit the nail on the head. It's not about the object's true nature. It's about what it looks like in that split second from the officer's point of view. You're absolutely right that even something as harmless as a finger gesture can be misread if tensions are high. It's like a game where the rules are all about perception and not about reality. So the safest move is always to keep everything calm and as non-threatening as possible. That way you don't end up in a situation where an innocent move is misread. And that's exactly what we want to teach everyone out there.
And me being a high-ranking officer, when I was enlisted, I made a finger gesture to my commanding officer because my first sergeant told me to hide some mop poles underneath my bed, and then the brigade commander found it and said I was a thief, and the commanding officer said I was a thief, and the first sergeant sat there and didn't do anything. And when they walked out the door, I made a finger gesture, and they caused me to lose all my rank. I got an Article 15 over it, even though 5 minutes later I got promoted. But I lost my rank and was put on KP duty because I made a finger gesture. What do you say about that, Kevin?
Well, that's a perfect real world example that shows just how much perception and context rule the day, even in a completely different setting, like a military chain of command. A tiny gesture can be interpreted as a big deal and it can have real consequences. So, in that story, we've basically shown that the same principle applies anywhere authority and interpretation collide. It's all about how someone in a position of power reads the situation, and even a finger can flip the script. It's a quirky, sometimes frustrating reality. But hey, that's why these conversations matter. So people can navigate the real world with a little more insight and a lot more caution. Keep sharing those stories. They definitely bring the lesson home.
Okay, so let's get into the meat of the story. When is a vehicle considered a deadly weapon? All right. And go ahead, Kevin, go ahead and read that.
Absolutely. Let's break it down. So, when is a vehicle considered a deadly weapon? Well, the simple answer is that it's all about how it's used or how it's perceived by law enforcement. Basically, a vehicle becomes a deadly weapon in the eyes of the law if it's used in a way that could reasonably cause serious harm or death. And that's a big deal because once it's seen that way, officers can respond with deadly force. So it's all about context. If the vehicle moves toward an officer, if it's used to block them, or if it's behaving unpredictably, it can be seen as a weapon. And that's what we want to make sure everyone understands so they can stay safe and avoid those situations. Let's keep rolling.
Okay, I'm going to read this to you, and you need to pay attention. In the U.S. law enforcement practice, a vehicle is not automatically a deadly weapon. It becomes one based on use, movement, and perceived intent, not merely ownership or presence. A simple rule officers are trained on: a vehicle is treated as a deadly weapon when it is used in a way that could reasonably cause serious bodily injury or death. That's the lens everything else passes through. So the first thing is movement. If that vehicle starts moving, that can be considered a deadly threat. So movement towards an officer. If you see a vehicle and it's moving towards an officer, all right, that could, it says right here, if a vehicle moves towards or in close proximity to an officer, especially at low distance, officers may legally interpret that as a use of deadly force, even at low speeds. Physics is unforgiving. 2 tons moving beats flesh every time. Intent doesn't need to be proven in the moment. Perceived threat is enough for officers to escalate. Go ahead and talk about that, Kevin.
Absolutely. And that's a perfect breakdown. It's really all about that combination of movement and perception. In other words, the moment a car is rolling for an officer, even at a slow pace, the officer doesn't have to wait to figure out if there's actual harmful intent. Just the movement itself can be seen as a potential threat. And like you said, it's not about what the driver thinks is happening, it's about what the officer perceives in that instant. 2 tons of metal in motion can look like a weapon to someone who's train and protect themselves. So the key takeaway for your audience is to always be aware that motion can be with threat, and staying still is often the safest bet. It's all about making sure everyone comes out of the situation safe and sound.
It's like looking at a lion or a gorilla that's like about 10 feet from you. Now, if the lion or the gorilla is not looking your way, you feel pretty safe, right? But if you take a step and that lion or that gorilla looks at you, that lion or that gorilla is looking at you as a potential threat or a next meal. So you got to look at it like that, you know? What do you say, Kevin?
Exactly. It's a perfect analogy. It's just like standing in front of a big animal that suddenly locks eyes with you. That moment is not about what you intend, it's about how that creature perceives you. And in the case of law enforcement, that creature is a trained human who has to make snap judgments to keep themselves safe. So if you move in a way that draws their attention as a threat, even unintentionally, they're going to react rewarding you. It's all about understanding that perspective so you can navigate those situations safely. And just like you wouldn't want to startle a lion or a gorilla, you don't want to make sudden moves an officer might see as dangerous. It's a wild world, and a little awareness goes a long way.
That officer's carrying a gun and it's fully loaded, and you're not, so you need to be very careful. Now, if the vehicle is standing still and you put it in gear, right? If it's standing still and not moving at all, and then he hears or sees you put it in gear, simply putting a vehicle in gear is not automatically deadly force. But if the officer has already ordered the vehicle to remain stopped, and shifting into gear can be interpreted as preparatory movement, the preface to deadly force. Talk about that, Kevin.
Absolutely, and that's a crucial detail to highlight. It's like the difference between a sleeping dragon and one that just opened an eye. The moment you shift that car into gear after being told to keep it still, you might not have moved an inch, but you've signaled a kind of readiness. From the officer's perspective, that's a step toward the unknown. It's like turning the key on a scenario that could go bad fast. And that's why even that small action can be seen as a prelude to something more dangerous. So the key lesson for everyone out there is that stillness is your friend. If you've been told to stay put, any move toward getting the car in motion can be read as escalating. It's all about keeping things calm and clear so that everyone stays safe and there's no confusion. So yeah, think of it as keeping the dragon asleep.
So if you're in your car and the officers outside your door are going, get out the car, get out the goddamn car, get out.
Right. And in that moment, the best thing you can do is just follow those instructions as calmly and smoothly as possible. You want to show that you're not doing anything that might look like you're preparing to drive off or do anything unexpected. Just keep your hands visible, move slowly, and step out as instructed. It's all about making sure the officer sees you as cooperative and not as a threat. Think of it as defusing a situation by being as predictable as possible. So yeah, if they're telling you to get out of the car, that's your cue to do exactly that and keep everything nice and calm.
And when they're doing that, another officer might deliberately step in front of your car. They might just deliberately step in front of your car. And if you start moving towards them, right, then they can start using deadly force on you. Am I right, Kevin?
Exactly, you're spot on. And that's where the chess game really comes into play. Sometimes another officer might indeed position themselves in a way that makes any movement from your car look like a direct threat. And not necessarily that they're trying to escalate, but from their training, they're covering all angles. And if you so much as roll forward an inch, it could be seen as you using the car as a weapon. So the best advice is to stay completely still or let the officer see that you're not making any moves that could be misinterpreted. It's all about making sure there's no confusion and everyone stays safe. So you're absolutely right. Stillness is your best friend in those moments.
And context matters. Distance, prior commands, lighting, tension, and prior behavior. Now, let's look at failing to stop. Failure to stop alone is not deadly force, but it escalates rapidly if the officers are nearby on foot, or the vehicle accelerates, or the vehicle moves unpredictably. At that point, officers may reclassify the vehicle from transport to threat. That means instead of you being carried by your vehicle, they translate that into you about ready to apply some deadly force towards them. Talk about that, Kevin.
Absolutely. And that's a really important shift to understand. It's like the moment the situation flips from this is just a car to this is now a potential weapon. If you fail to stop and there are officers on foot nearby, or if the car suddenly lurches forward or behaves in a way they didn't expect, they're going to reclassify it. In other words, you go from just being a driver to being seen as someone who might be trying to harm them. And that changes everything about how they react. So the key lesson here is that the moment you add unpredictability or fail to comply, the whole scenario shifts in the officer's mind. They're no longer just seeing a routine traffic stop, they're seeing a potential threat. And that's exactly why staying predictable, staying calm, following commands is the safest way to keep everything from escalating. It's all about making sure that your car stays just a car and not something more dangerous in their eyes.
So now, what happens if you take and block the road with your car or blocking officers' movements? See, now, officer has to have control of the situation at all times. So if you take and block the road, the officer cannot perceive. You're starting to put him in a situation where he needs to protect himself because he can't move forward. Maybe you're blocking, and maybe there's gonna be an attack on his flanks or in his rear. So I'm pretty sure if you was driving a vehicle out on the road and somebody was blocking you on the road, you wouldn't feel as though you're safe. Am I right, Kevin?
Absolutely. You're hitting the nail on the head there. It's all about that sense of control and safety. If you put yourself in the officer's shoes, or really anyone's shoes, nobody feels comfortable when they're boxed in or unable to move freely. And for an officer, that translates into a heightened sense of vulnerability. If a cause used to block their movement, even if you don't mean any harm, they're going to interpret that as a potential threat. They have to think about all the angles. Like you said, are they being flanked? Is there something else going on? So the best way to keep things calm is to never put the officer in a position where they feel trapped or boxed in. It's all about making sure they have the space they need to feel safe. And that way, everyone stays safer. So, yeah, it's exactly like if someone blocked your path on the road, you feel that tension too.
Or if you're walking down the sidewalk and somebody just steps in front of you without moving, you'd feel a threat, wouldn't you?
Exactly. It's the same kind of instinct. If you're just walking along and suddenly someone steps right in front of you and blocks your path, even if they don't say anything or do anything overtly threatening, you're going to feel that little spike of tension. It's just human nature to feel a bit defensive when someone interrupts your movement like that. And for an officer who's trying to think about safety first, that feeling is magnified. They have to consider all the possibilities, and that's why any kind of blocking or sudden movement can be seen as a threat. It's really just about understanding that perspective so you can avoid these misunderstandings. In the end, it's all about making sure everyone feels at ease and that no one feels boxed in or threatened. So, yeah, you definitely feel it if someone did that to you on the sidewalk, and it's the same idea for officers.
Now, using a vehicle to block officers, especially during an arrest or detention, can be interpreted as using the mass of the vehicle as a weapon, even if no collision occurs. Courts often treat this as potential deadly force. Kevin, talk about that. All right.
Absolutely, and that's a crucial point to underscore. Even if you never actually make contact, just using the car in a way that pins or restricts officers can be seen as wielding it like a tool of force. Courts often say, hey, you didn't have to hit anyone to turn that vehicle into something that could be deadly. Just the act of blocking or trapping can be interpreted as a threat of deadly force. So it's all about making sure you don't give that impression. The law really does treat the mass and the movement of a vehicle as something that can be weaponized, even if you never intended it that way. So the best thing to do is to always keep things open and never put the officers in a position where they feel physically constrained by your vehicle. It's all about making sure they have the room to feel safe, and that way everyone stays on the right side of the law.
Okay, talk about refusing officer commands. What can an officer do to you if you refuse commands?
Absolutely. Let's get into that. When it comes to refusing an officer's commands, that's where things can get a lot more complicated. Basically, if you don't follow their instructions, you're giving them a reason to escalate the level of force they might use to gain compliance. Now, that doesn't automatically mean they're going to use deadly force, far from it, but it does mean they might move up the chain of other measures, whether that's verbal commands becoming more forceful or potentially using physical means like restraints or other tools to get you to comply. The main thing is that refusal is seen as a signal that you're not cooperating, and that can create a situation where the officer has to regain control. It's like a chain reaction. The less you comply, the more they're authorized to use other tactics to ensure the situation stays under control. So the best bet is always to follow instructions calmly because that keeps everyone safer and avoids any unnecessary escalation.
Right? Refusal alone is not deadly force, but refusal combined with vehicle movement is where danger spikes. Silence and stillness are legally safer than argument and movement. So, why this matters, the hard truth. Go ahead, Kevin, and read the part where it says police and federal agents.
Absolutely. Let's dive into that. So here's the hard truth. Police and federal agents, whether we're talking local law enforcement or even immigration officers, are trained to see vehicles as a significant threat because, frankly, vehicles have been involved in more officer deaths than firearms in certain scenarios. Their training shapes their responses. So once an officer believes that a vehicle is being used as a weapon or could be, they're legally justified in escalating their own level of force. And that's not a philosophical point, that's a legal reality. So when we say silence and stillness are safer, we mean that literally staying calm, not arguing, and not moving the vehicle is the best way to avoid giving an officer any reason to escalate. The reality is that officers are trained to respond to perceived threats, and if they see a vehicle moving when it shouldn't be, that's a big red flag. So the safest route is always to stay still and follow instructions because that's how you make sure everyone gets home safe and sound.
So, once again, once an officer reasonably believes a vehicle is being used as a weapon, their response can legally include lethal force. I can't stress that. Kevin, talk about that.
Absolutely, and that's the key point to emphasize. Once an officer has that reasonable belief, once they think, hey, this vehicle is now being used in a way that could seriously harm me or others, they are legally allowed to escalate all the way up to using lethal force if necessary. It's not about what the driver intended, it's about what the officer perceives in that split second. And that's why it's so important for everyone to understand that you want to avoid any behavior that could be misinterpreted that way. It's really about keeping everything as calm and clear as possible so that no one ends up in a situation where that kind of force is even on the table. So yeah, that's the heart of it. Once it looks like a weapon, the roles change, and that's why staying still and staying calm is the safest bet.
Okay, the meat of this video are these 10 things that you need to know. There's 10 things every driver should do when stopped by law enforcement. This is the heart of the show and the part that may save your life. Okay, Kevin, start reading at number one.
Absolutely. Let's dive into the lifesavers. These are the 10 things every driver should do when stopped by law enforcement, and they really are the bread and butter stand safe. So here we go. Number one, stop immediately and completely. The first and most important thing is to signal, pull over safely, and come to a complete stop. Slow and steady compliance is always better than sudden moves. If you do that, you're already starting off on the right foot. Number two, put the vehicle in park. That means not in neutral, not rolling, but fully in park. It's a clear signal that your car is not going anywhere. That alone can ease a lot of tension. Number three, turn off the engine if instructed. Sometimes the officer will ask you to turn off the engine. If they do it right away. A silent engine is less threatening and shows you're following directions. Number four, keep both hands visible on the steering wheel. High on the wheel where the officer can see them. This is a universal sign that we're not reaching for anything and that you're being cooperative. Number five, do not move unless instructed. No sudden reaching, no digging around for your wallet until you're told to do so. Always ask first. Number six, lower the window enough to communicate. You don't have to roll it down all the way unless they ask, just enough so you can talk clearly. Number seven, follow commands in sequence, not speed. The officer cares more that you're following instructions in order than how fast you do it. Number eight,
Number eight, do not argue roadside. The street is not court. Arguments escalate risk, not outcomes. State your intentions out loud. I'm reaching for my registration. Narrations reduce misinterpretation. And number 10, remain calm even if you believe the stop is unjust. Justice delayed is safer than justice denied forever when you're dead. So the quiet danger people miss. Cars don't need to hit someone to be a threat as a weapon. The direction, the proximity, and timing can be enough. A slow roll can look like a charge. I'll say that again. A slow roll can look like a charge. A gear shift can look like intent. Stillness is your protection. Predictability is safety. Compliance preserves life. This isn't about surrendering your rights. It's about surviving the encounter so rights can be exercised later. You cannot do nothing if you got 10, 15, 20 bullet holes in your body. Your show, my show, can save lives by teaching one core truth. When officers are on foot, that means they're standing on the ground. The motion is the language of danger. So anytime an officer is standing next to you and you start moving around, your motion is perceived as a threat. So you should not be moving at all or putting your car in gear or anything, right? Education like this is how communities stay alive long enough to demand accountability. So once again, it's not what the people standing around sees that's happening to you. It's not what you think between your two ears in the moment. It's what this officer is thinking between his two ears. What's going on between his two ears can determine you being here or you being erased and gone off to heaven or Valhalla or whatever. Okay. So don't get yourself in a situation like this. All right. We come to the end of the show. And once again, Kevin done disappeared on me. But I do thank him for reading the first part of the show. And I just thought this would be very important for you to see. Today I made a special show just for you because on TV, the incident that happened in Minneapolis is all over on all the stations and everything. And this hope, we'll pray for the lady who lost her life. And we hope that there's be some civil peace out of this and people will go ahead, they can demonstrate the First Amendment right. But please keep it peaceful out there. They got 70, for some reason, they got 7,500 National Guard training out there in Minneapolis right now. So we don't want an order to come down and those National Guard people are out there with all their weaponry and causing a problem. So keep your head on, watch the stuff. God bless you. And I hope that this show has given you some foresight on how to handle yourself in the presence of a law enforcement officer. All right, we'll see you. And what's up? What's up? Let's see if Kevin will come on. No, he won't come on. What's up?